13 of the fantasy football season, and he's top 15 quarterbacks. I'm ranking this week number 1, Patrick Mahomes of the Kansas City Chiefs. So Patrick Mahomes, it's been a solid season for him once again this year, no doubt about it. But this year, the monster ball games really haven't been there. He's hovering about 20, 25 fantasy points per game is Patrick Mahomes, where he's only had 2 games at 30 or more fantasy points. This week here, Sunday Night Football, pretty decent matchup with the Green Bay Packers, where they're vulnerable to giving up a decent amount of passing yards on the season here is Green Bay. And Patrick Mahomes, he's starting to find who he could trust in this offense. Rashee Rice, definitely that number 1 wide receiver, obviously Travis Kelce. And now he's just got to find a few more guys in that passing game to really elevate his numbers once again. So this week, going into this one at Green Bay, I think he has a good ball game. And he's number 1. Number 2, Jalen Hurts to the Philadelphia Eagles. So Jalen Hurts, another great season, an MVP-type season here for Hurts, where this Eagle team, they just find ways to win. We see that's Jalen Hurts there, leading the comebacks, leading the victories, putting up yards, and making the smart plays. And this week here, NFC Championship rematch versus the 49ers coming to town. This game could be a potential shootout. I know San Francisco, one of the better defenses in the league, but Jalen Hurts is matchup proof, and each and every week he's delivered elite numbers besides 1 and 2 games this season. Number 3 to the Miami Dolphins. It's been a great season for him. When you got weapons like Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Raheem Mostert out of the backfield having a career season, you're just going to put up fantasy numbers, and he knows this Mike McDaniel system down pat is Tua. So this week here, great matchup at the Commanders. They've been shredded each and every week. We saw Tommy DeVito in Week 11 have a big game at Washington. We saw Dak Prescott and the Cowboys destroy him in Week 12 with a monster game. And this week, I expect the same here by Tua, going possibly 250, 300 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns in this one. Number 4, Dak Prescott of the Dallas Cowboys. So Dak Prescott, surprisingly, he's been one of the better quarterbacks in the last month of the season, where in the beginning of the year, it looked like this Cowboy team protecting Dak with safe throws and not stretching the field. But now God has all the confidence in the world. He's stretching the field. CeeDee Lamb, he's emerged as a top 5 wide receiver quickly over the last few weeks as well here. And this week here in a pretty good matchup in a potential shootout versus the Seattle Seahawks. I think Dak Prescott once again goes out there on Thursday night and has a good game. And we know Thursday Night Football usually are high-scoring games. Number 5, C.J. Stroud of the Houston Texans. C.J. Stroud, definitely a front-runner right now for Rookie of the Year. And he goes out there weekly, and he plays great football and puts up numbers, is C.J. Stroud. So right now, tough loss, no doubt about it, to the division rival last week in the Jacksonville Jaguars. But C.J. Stroud kept his team in the game. He was making plays. Him and Tank Dell on great chemistry and have great rapport. Nico Collins having a good year. Dalton Schultz besides last week. And this week here in a good matchup versus the Denver Broncos. I know the Broncos defense the last 4 or 5 weeks have definitely improved. I still think Stroud in a home game versus Denver could go out there and put in a good performance. Number 6, Justin Herbert of Los Angeles Chargers. So Herbert, he definitely had a down game, and it was a tough matchup versus the Ravens on Sunday Night Football in Week 12. This week here, better matchup at New England. I know they got a cross-country trip, this Los Angeles Charger team, but pretty much they got to win almost every game if they want to have a shot at making the playoffs and saving Staley's job. So right now, good matchup in New England. We know they really can't stop anyone for the most part. And this week here, I think Herbert in this offense bounces back, even though it's been tough for him to find that number 2 weapon in the passing game when injuries to Joshua Palmer, Mike Williams out for the season, and guys like Jalen Guyton and Quentin Johnson really haven't stepped up. Number 7, Sam Howell of the Washington Commanders. So Sam Howell, he's a gunslinger. He goes out there and he just finds ways to get yards and put points on the board, even though I know there's been a lot of garbage time for this Washington Commander team over the last few weeks here. This week, once again, I think we're going to see more garbage time with the Dolphins coming to town. Wait, quickly, this game could be 10-14-0 with the Dolphins on top. But Sam Howell, amongst the league leaders in passing yards, and pretty much weekly, worst case, you're getting 20 fantasy points from him, besides a few games earlier this season. Number 8, Jared Goff of the Detroit Lions. So Jared Goff, he's been a turnover machine, no doubt about it, over the last few weeks here. But Goff's still one of the better quarterbacks in fantasy football. And even with the turnovers last week, he found a way to put up a solid fantasy game with garbage points at the end. Great weapons, though. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporte. And I think this game after last week, the Packers came in Detroit on Thanksgiving, and they shocked them with the victory. I think Jared Goff in this offense, they're going to protect the football a little bit more. Goff's going to get things going, and it's another plus as well that it's an indoor game at the Saints. So after a couple bad games in a row, I think Jared Goff rights the ship and turns it around this week. Number 9, Kyler Murray of the Arizona Cardinals. So Kyler Murray, we know he's a running quarterback. We know he turns the football over a decent amount and takes some hits as well. And this week here, it's definitely a tough matchup at the Pittsburgh Steelers. But with rushing yards alone, Murray's going to find ways to put 4 or 5 points up, minimum running the football. And this week here, yes, it's a tough matchup, but a lot of quarterbacks on bye as well. Josh Allen on bye, Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields. And Kyler Murray, we know he's got that playmaking ability. And out of nowhere, could put up 30, 40 fantasy points when you don't expect it. This week here at Pittsburgh, I still think he could get 20, 23 fantasy points in this one. This Cardinal offense, they got some weapons, obviously. Trey McBride, Hollywood Brown, Rondale Moore is a deep ball threat, James Conner. So I think this week, Kyler Murray, even in the tough matchup, puts in a decent performance. Number 10, Brock Purdy of the San Francisco 49ers. So Brock Purdy, we know this is a revenge game for him and this 49er team. After last season, he got knocked out in that NFC Championship game with the elbow injury. This team got off to a hot start, 5-0, then fallen to 5-3. Now the last few weeks, they wrote the ship and got to 8-3 is this 49er team. So right now, Brock Purdy, he's been a solid quarterback for the majority of the season. He's got great weapons, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, obviously Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield. And even in a tougher matchup, even though we've seen Philly this season give up a lot of points to opposing teams, we saw last week as well, I think Brock Purdy could go in there and put in a good ball game. Number 11, Trevor Lawrence of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So Trevor Lawrence, the last 2 weeks, he's turned things around. And after that bye week, this offense opened up a little bit. Him and Calvin Ridley have been on the same page. Christian Kirk and Lawrence always had a great rapport going back to last season with Kirk and with this Jacksonville Jaguar team. And now you got Evan Ingram and Travis Etienne, good parts of this offense. So this week here, Monday Night Football, good ball game. This team playing great football, winning 7 out of 8 games as this Jaguar team. And Cincinnati's middle of the pack defense, and obviously their confidence is down with Joe Burrow out for the season. So I think Lawrence could go in there and have a solid performance. Number 12, Russell Wilson of the Denver Broncos. So Wilson and this Bronco team, they've turned their whole season around after getting off to the 1-5 start. And Sean Payton, he's found ways to make it easier for Russell Wilson. After last season, Russell Wilson, he definitely looked like he was a quarterback that had his best years were behind him. But this season, he's making plays. He's picking his spots when he's going to run the football. And this week at Houston, and possibly a potential shootout, I have Wilson and number 12, 13, Baker Mayfield of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Baker Mayfield, it's been a pretty decent first season for him over there in Tampa Bay. I know it hasn't translated into many wins for the Bucs, especially over the last month of the season where they've been free-falling. But this week here matchup versus one of his former teams in the Carolina Panthers for Baker Mayfield, I think he could go and have a good game. And he's due for this Buc team to find the win. So pretty much this season, Baker Mayfield, he's been hovering at minimum 18, 20 fantasy points. So this week here versus one of the worst teams in the league in the Carolina Panthers, even though, believe it or not, their defense has been decent versus quarterbacks for the most part. I think Mayfield, with the juices flowing a little bit versus one of his former teams, has a decent game. Number 14, Derek Carr of the New Orleans Saints. And Derek Carr, the passing yards have been there all season. Just him finding the end zone and getting that second touchdown on the board have been a problem for him. And I know Chris Olave, he might or might not play in this game with a concussion. We got to wait and see as the week moves on. And this week here, it's a decent matchup versus the Detroit Lions. I give up the 9th most fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season. So like I said, the yards have been there for Derek Carr. Just him finding that second touchdown. I know the receiving corps is banged up with obviously Olave, the concussion. Like I mentioned, we don't know if he's going to play. Rashid Shaheed most likely out. And Thomas on IR already. So this week here, Carr's going to have to find ways to get the football down the field, especially if his Olave is out. But he's still a quarterback that cracks the top 13, and the 15th and final quarterback I'm ranking is Jordan Love of the Green Bay Packers. So Jordan Love, the last few weeks, he's definitely turned things around, and he's playing great football. Jaden Reed, he's emerged big time. Christian Watson, back in the thick of things. Romeo Doubs playing well. And pretty much the running game hasn't been existing, with Aaron Jones pretty much out for the season for the most part. He's only played a limited amount of games, and A.J. Dillon not doing much in between the tackles. Jordan Love, he's found ways to move the football down the field and make plays. But this week, he's low on my ranking board because it's a tough matchup versus Kansas City, one of the better defenses in the league. So right now, Jordan Love, definitely he could be outperform that 15 number with the tough matchup. And like I said, this Kansas City Chief team, great defense this season, only giving up 18 points per game on the season. Jordan Love is the number 15, so that's the top 15 quarterbacks I'm ranking for Week 13 of the fantasy football season.